This video will teach you all you need to know about grinding glass. I'll show you some methods and tips that I use to make this a quick and easy process. I've got Kurt joining us today. He has zero experience and he'll be following along with you guys.
Thank you for having me back, Sarah. I'm super excited to learn this process.
Let's get started. So safety is super important. I've got safety glasses for us.
Thank you.
Really important to protect your eyes when you're grinding glass. I've also got gloves that we use in stained glass making, and they have a rubber coating on the edge, help you keep a good grip on the glass and also prevent your fingertips from getting cuts on them. And one other thing that I have these grinding shields, and I set them up around the grinder to help prevent lots of little pieces getting all over the place. But because we're making a video, we're not gonna use those today. And finally, if you have an apron or some kind of shirt that fully covers your chest, that's a really important thing to wear so that you don't get little bits all over your skin, and then closed-toe shoes. So next we're gonna talk about tools. Obviously you'll need your grinder. I've also got a couple other tools that are really helpful when grinding. This one is called a cookie, and it's really good to help save your fingertips because they can get sore after a lot of grinding. And then I also have Nick's Grinder Mate, and this is really helpful for small little pieces of glass. If you guys are interested in these products, I found them super helpful. You can find a link in the description below. So before we get started grinding, we wanna make sure that our grinder is properly set up. Notice that there's a sponge here. You wanna make sure that it's good and wet with water to keep the grinder bit nice and wet so that when you're grinding, it doesn't make a lot of powder. Also, you have a reservoir in your grinder where water goes in to keep it cooled down and your sponge continue to stay wet.
Does this stuff go into the water?
Oh yes, and that does too. That is a coolant for the grinder so that it also helps it from getting too hot. So now that our grinder is all ready, I'm gonna show you what we're gonna be doing. So I have a straight and a curved. For the straight one, you notice here that we have a Sharpie line on the edge, and we're basically just gonna grind that away to have a nice, smooth, straight edge. I'm gonna go ahead and show Kurt how to grind, and then he's gonna finish grinding the rest of it. We're gonna turn on our grinder, and basically, even pressure. We're just gonna go from side to side. You don't want to push too hard in one spot. You want to just keep it real even. So I'm going to turn this off. I'll go ahead and give you the gloves, Kurt. Go ahead and turn it on.
Should I be going faster or slower for my passes across?
I think the speed you're doing is really good. If you go too fast, it's probably not gonna be as effective.
Okay.
So how did that go, Kurt?
I think it went pretty well. It is really important to have that even pressure because as you start grinding, if you slightly get caught at one end, you can feel it, the pressure change as you're trying to guide it. So I think being consistent with the movement would help in future passes.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Sometimes it's easy to get a little carried away when you're grinding a lot of pieces and you want to make the process quicker, but really it just takes time. Now that you've got a good feel for it, do you think that you'd be ready to try something a little more challenging?
Yeah, I think I'm ready. I think that a straight line might be a little harder than like a curve. So I'm excited to kind of get in there and see what we can do.
We have a cutout piece right here, and there's a pattern. So whenever you're grinding, you want to grind up to the edge of the pattern. So you want to grind all the way up to the pattern so that you don't see any of this glass at all. You should just see the pattern piece. So I'm gonna start off grinding and then I'll have Kurt take over. It's a little bit more difficult with this kind of shape. So when I do a shape like this, I kind of go a little section at a time, and then I kind of work my way around. Since this is not just like a little piece I can go back and forth with. So especially when you're on like these little tiny tips, you don't want to be too much pressure. You want to have a good hold on it and just be easy with it. Sometimes our pattern will get wet. It's just good to keep kind of like pushing it down to keep it flat so it doesn't roll back. And it's okay to take breaks and to look and make sure that you're seeing what you're doing, because sometimes it's easy to lose sight of it when you're kind of hovering over. Are you ready, Kurt? So I'm gonna have Kurt try the cookie. It's just gonna help push, save his fingertips. So now we're done grinding this curved shape. We had a little bit of issues with the pattern getting a little bit too wet, which is a common thing that happens, especially for beginners. It could be your paper is a little thin, or maybe you got a little bit too much water on your sponge, or in your grinder there's just too much water and it's just spitting too much. That did make it a little bit harder.
I think that it also just shows that you have to be really intentional with the grinding process. You know, you have to be precise and make sure that you're not spending too much time on it, and making sure that your passes are just intentional passes. That way you have the full longevity of the pattern.
So comparing the straight cut and the curved cut, do you have any feedback or any thoughts?
I definitely think that having a straight line that you're trying to grind is honestly a little bit more tricky than doing a curved line, just because you have to make sure that you have that even pressure across the entire pass. But with a curved line, you're able to kind of have that movement that you're not focusing on it being so straight. You're mainly just trying to even it out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so now that you've tried grinding, do you think that you feel comfortable to do this on your own?
It looks a little bit more intimidating than what it actually is. As long as you take your time, I feel like I could do this.
I love your enthusiasm. Thank you, Kurt. We'll be making a lot more videos just like this one. So if you have any questions at all, please put them in the comments below. And thank you guys so much for watching.
Subscribe.